Hi, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. Hey, y'all. Hey, this is our last show of the season where Brian and I get to rest.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we're a little tired.
And as always, we both hope that we find you well. And thank you, as always, for tuning in for the next 60 minutes, no matter how you tune in or where you're catching us. And we just have such an awesome show today. We really do.
We do. So I want to jump right into it. You guys remember him. This is that phase. Orice Jenkins. He is a member of the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage. And the Afro American Historical Genealogical Society. He's presented his findings at the College of William and Mary and Lemon Project Spring Symposium, Family Search Roots Text Conference, and just everything. You guys remember him from our Juneteenth show talking about music. And now he's here to discuss his brand spanking new book, brand spanking new. The early count, that's right, show it. The Early County Massacre. Goolsby versus the state of Georgia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. How are y'all doing?
We are good.
I am good. I am
Yes,
good.
Great.
yes.
Nice to meet you, Brian, because you missed the last one that I was on, and we've never met in person either. So it's good to see you.
Yes. Yes. Again, apologies for that nasty flu. And I just want to say that sometimes, because your book has a very interesting origin story, apart from the story that you convey, and had it not been for an offhanded comment from a relative, because I believe, yeah, because you were born and raised in Connecticut, you don't live in Georgia, you were going down there, and you just were curious, you wanted to check out where your Goulson family came from a town called Jenkins in Early County, and it was just one of your
Blakely.
cousins that happened. Oh, Blakely. Sorry, that's right. I stand corrected. And it was just one of your family members who's like, "Hey, while you're there, can you check out something about this massacre that happened?" Um, so because I'm assuming because your cousin said that or your family member said that you had never heard the story that you've actually come to write about and you're on the show to talk about. You had never heard this history before.
Oh no, never, never heard about it. Even in that moment, I didn't hear about it because she didn't call it a massacre. I'm the first person to call it the Early County Massacre, but she called it Grandison's Uprising. That's what she called it. And she didn't explain to me who Grandison was. She didn't explain what she meant by an uprising, and she didn't explain what it had to do with anything. She didn't even mention that her aunt was a survivor of it until several months later. Uh, I don't know why she brought it up again on the phone with her, but she brought it up one more time, and I still didn't know what she was talking about. But she explained kind of what happened as far as her aunt, my cousin Charlotte Reynolds, how she was involved, and then I still didn't really think about it until maybe about a year after that. I found the newspaper articles, and that's when I realized, oh, this was a big event. This was a really, really serious event. It was on the front page of every major newspaper in the country. So that's what kind of made it all click. But it took a couple of times for her to mention it to me before I realized.
Interesting. And you do bring up a good point. It's one of the kind of pet passions that Donnie and I share. That we always find it interesting that when it comes to United States history, any large scale conflict between whites and blacks that involve guns amongst black people are automatically referred to as a riot or an uprising. That
Mm,
somehow there's a genesis in there that it's our fault. It's
Hmm.
black people's fault. And we're going to get into this much, much, much more because you actually write very eloquently about this. And there's a lot in South Carolina, especially around voter registration, which are referred to by white historians as riots. When you really look at them, they're massacres because who was disproportionately murdered, tortured, killed?
Right.
Unarmed black, and I'm stressing this word, unarmed black people.
Hmm.
So any of the men who may have had a gun, they had already been dealt with, or they were out of the picture. These were multiple day events. That's the other thing that just really struck me about your book. This incident that involved your family, a lot of your Black family being lynched, happened over 3 or 4 days.
Right.
That
Wasn't it more so like weeks because of how long it took for them to find different people type of
Well, in a
thing?
way, it could be years. You could consider
Yeah.
this
yeah.
was an issue for years because of the court trial that resulted from the massacre. But the actual massacre where folks were getting killed, that was 3 days.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
You know,
but it continued on for 5 years. Some people could say 20 years it continued on, but it's even now. I mean, there's still effects that we are feeling of this massacre right now.
Really?
Absolutely.
My God.
okay,
Absolutely.
well,
There's still people that will not go back to Blakely, where they are from, because of the events that happened in December of 1915.
well, then that's just the same as Edgefield, because Donnie and I have Black cousins who no longer live in Edgefield. They live around Edgefield County, South Carolina. You could not pay them to drive through Edgefield. They
Yeah, they
will
won't
go
go.
40, yeah, they'll go an hour out of their way to drive around Edgefield.
Yeah.
That's trauma.
Yeah. And I
That's trauma.
understand it. I understand it, but I am actively working to get people to start going back to Early County because this is the land that, and you saw I go into a little bit of the slavery history in my book, even though this event does not happen during slavery, but we were the ones that cleared this land that, we built everything that's there. Um,
Yeah.
and so I want my family to go back to Early County because that's still our home. My ancestors were there for 7 generations.
My
I
God.
cannot say that about
So,
any other place on this continental United States. So,
so before I get to my first question specifically about the book, I just wanted to give you a huge shout out because your epilogue is awesome. Because
thank you.
if anyone wanted to know what kind of a condensed genealogical log, research log reads like, that is your epilogue. That because that showed all the research methodology, your research strategy, some of the issues that you came into, and again touching on that because this is in essence, this is a genealogy and family history show. I thought the way that you outlined how you researched the story in itself was just excellent. So I wanted to give you those kudos. As one researcher to
Thank you.
another, I wanted to give you those flowers. Because you had some tricky things to research. You had people whose name changed, who disappeared. We'll get more into disappearing at the end of the book. But you had a lot of research challenges.
Right. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm glad that I put that in there because I just wanted to make sure that any questions someone might have, because of course people are wondering, how are you sure about these things? How, there's so many different versions of the story, so many different, especially one of the people whose name was changed. Well, it wasn't really changed, but he used different versions of his name. Um, he's someone that survived the massacre, but is constantly listed as someone that was killed. So that's the main thing that I was like, oh, I need to correct this record that this person is alive or was alive after the massacre and show kind of my thinking about how to, reconcile all these different issues that I had with several of the people, because a lot of them were reported killed, subjects of the story that actually survived. So thank you for recognizing that. And I'm glad you read that because my thing is, I'm like, oh, people are not going to read the epilogue. They're not going to read all the transcripts I put in there, all the charts I put in there. So it's nice. It's really nice and rewarding to know that somebody actually reads the extra things
Well,
that
I
I
mean,
put in
if they don't read that, that's hard. That's hard for them not to necessarily understand certain parts of it. I mean, you definitely weave, the story well enough for them to get it. But even if they read the book first and then go back and read those things, it's definitely something for them. It's more to it. And I found that to because that's what I had to do. I read the book first and then I went back and I looked at some of the charts, some of the, different um, photos that gave the information about the actual court records, certain court documents that you had in there and things of that nature, because then it gave a little bit more context in what it was that you were saying and everything. I guess as researchers, that's what we do. So,
I hope
you know,
so.
yeah, I mean, that's what we do. We're like, oh, okay, let's look at this or, whatever. But overall, I think, the Brian and I were talking, there were so many different quotes in here that just made such an impact on a lot of things that are going on today.
Mm.
That was just amazing to me. And I didn't realize, there are, I don't know, Brian may smack my hand virtually, but I have a hard time trusting women of non-melanated, I'm trying to say this, of Caucasian women, because of the lies that were told by this woman in here. And this is not the first time. We can take Emmett Till. We can take, there's always something. I can even go into my own research and look at different things that we found with women who just they will purposely lie to get our Black men into so much trouble. You can even come into today and look at the lady with the different quote unquote Karens, as they call them now. The lady in the park, and how she tried to get the man in trouble with the dog while she was hanging her own dog. She was getting this man in trouble in the park. I have an issue with that. And this lady did the exact same thing. She was lying. And Irene, that's what's her name, Irene. Do you pronounce his name Henry Villepique?
Villepigue. Well, yeah.
Villepique.
There's technically a G, but they do spell it with a Q sometimes. So you can say Villepique, Villepigue. Some people spell it Phill, Philippigue. So, but yeah, Villepigue.
Yeah, his wife. I was having an issue, and I knew before I even got to that point. I was like, "Oh, this chick right here, she about to lie," and and she did. Sure enough, she
Some of the
lied.
stuff she was saying, I don't even know where she came up with that
Yeah,
stuff.
and that's what I was reading. I was like, "Where'd that come from?"
You know what? Because today, like then, no matter what receipts we bring to the table, no matter how much consensus Black victims and Black witnesses have to an event, all it takes is one white narrative to trump everything,
Everything.
and that one person's belief automatically, no
Everything. And
questions asked.
and I love, and then please do not get me wrong. My white female cousins, I absolutely adore them.
They are ride or die.
They are ride or die women without a doubt, but you got them ones that's just not. And it is something that burns and I think that's why it burns my soul when you see them ones that's not. Oh my, oh,
Yeah. Well, I got a couple things to say because I agree with you. I have some white female cousins that have helped me more with my genealogy than any other person. I mean, and I love them dearly.
yes.
Um, and then also you have situations like all these cases that we've been talking about. Even in the Tulsa race massacre, even in just some the Rosewood massacre as well. You know, very very similar things that happen. Um, and there's almost there's no penalty. You know,
None.
not only that, in my particular case, the woman goes and marries into the prosecutor's family.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's just, but like you
Never.
said, there were three witnesses to the case that the Goolsby brothers were tried for, right? Three people that saw what happened. Irene Villepigue is not one of them.
No.
She was asleep.
She was asleep.
So the three witnesses were three black people. So it's almost as if, their testimony didn't matter except for the part where one of them actually testified on behalf of the prosecution. So that's what they all wanted to, hold on to. And Irene Philippe's word was just, that's what everybody went with. And that literally people started killing other human beings because of her words. It's just amazing to me. I'm dumbfounded every time I think about how all she had to say was, 3 black people shot my husband in the back.
And the way, soon as I read that, and I was like, and here we go. Soon as I read that one sentence that she said, the next thing that came out of my mouth was, and here we go. Because I immediately thought about Edward Ball. And when we read Edward Ball's book, and how the woman in Edward Ball's book, and how the lies was coming from there. Uh-oh. And then I heard other stuff. I don't know. Stuff it just worked my nerves. The whole thing just worked my nerves.
One of the things I wanted to say is kind of starting at the very beginning. Oris had done a wonderful job getting contemporary newspaper articles that spoke about the Black community prior to this incident, where it was written about in newspapers that these were good Negroes who owned their lands, they were successful farmers or successful tradesmen, basically a Black middle class. It sounded like an enclave of Black middle class who were doing it for themselves, had pulled themselves up, because, again, this is right after slavery, had pulled themselves up from the bootstrap and were doing it, minding their own business. They had set up Black fraternal organizations, and they had a vibrant religious, communities of faith. Again, farmers all supporting each other. And then this craziness ensues, and it's like all of that it's forgotten, and then all of a sudden they're the bad guys getting lynched. Is that a fair assessment, Oris? That it was a very prosperous Black community.
Very prosperous. Everything you said is true. I mean, just when I think about Mary Goolsby alone, owned almost 600 acres of land at one time. As a Black woman in rural Georgia, Southwest Georgia, and it wasn't just her. I mean, I just went to the Georgia archives and went through some tax records while I was in Atlanta. And I went through all of the people, the Black tax list, because of course it's segregated, and just saw all the people that owned all this land. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, it was like, I call it a rural version of Black Wall Street,
Mhm.
because the Goolsbys, they had everything they needed. And they had their own businesses too. Mary Goolsby also had 6, I think, town lots in the town of Blakely, which is about 7 miles from out in the country where they were living. You know, they were taking care of so many things without help, without welfare, as they always tried to accuse us of. I even have a letter from someone that said, "Oh, the white people were paying for everything the Goolsbys were doing." Well, the records don't show that to be true. Grandison Goolsby and Mary Goolsby have their deeds. A lot of the land, some of the land, they purchased from other Black people, other Black lodge members, other Black members of other fraternal organizations. So, really, all throughout the county, I see all this Black wealth that I did not know existed until I started to research for this book. I was very surprised to find these things because I was never taught about that period of Reconstruction and things like that during
Well, we're
And
never
school.
aren't we
told.
always surprised? Aren't we always surprised to learn
Well,
these things?
we are because we're never taught that Black people, not, and again, not all Black people, but that there were Black people in communities that had wealth. We were never taught that.
But we were never taught. But again, this rides on the same thing that I talk about all the time. We were never taught Reconstruction and what we did during Reconstruction.
Well, there's
This
But the
that
this
reason
fact.
why is because of what happened, how it was taken away. That's the shame of this country. One of the other shames of this country is how
Yes.
things were burned down, like you were talking about the election riots that were
Mm,
happening literally right during Reconstruction in the
yes.
1860s. Then all the way to this is 1915, the same year that the KKK comes back.
Yes.
And between this one, the Rosewood, the summer of 1919, all across the country, Tulsa, 1921, with every step that we built these things, they were burned to the ground, and
Yeah.
that's the shame that people don't want to admit. Because then you have people like Mother Viola Fletcher, who's 100 and something years old, still fighting for her. She is a living survivor of a massacre, and they
Yep.
still won't acknowledge, the I can't even put it into words what they caused. The trauma, the destruction.
Yep.
People are afraid to reckon with these things, but who cares? We have to reckon with it. You can't be afraid. You can't be afraid
No,
of it.
I'm not going to use. I kind of want to use the word genocide, but like on a smaller scale. But Tulsa and what happened here in Early County, they wiped out an entire community. I mean,
But
I
it
don't
is
even know what other
genocide,
word.
Brian. It is. It
What other?
is. It.
What other?
It.
Because what other word can you use?
It isn't. There is not a. It is not one other word that you can use. There. It is an attempt of genocide, because the thing is that they didn't succeed. So it is a definite, consistent attempt to genocide in every level. They've attempted to commit genocide on us on several occasions, through abortion, through slavery, through however you want to think
The
about it.
Tuskegee, the
to,
Tuskegee
to ski
syphilis.
exactly the experiment. No matter how you look at it, it is a constant attempt of genocide, and we have consistently and constantly moved away and gotten away from it. We've lived through it.
Listen,
Now,
they dropped bombs
In
on
Philadelphia,
not just, I was going to say Tulsa, but yeah,
so,
Philadelphia too, and that wasn't that long ago.
and
But
that was in the 80s, exactly.
in Tulsa, they dropped the bomb. How? What else do you call that? I even think about in my book, which thankfully there were no bombs involved, but they purposely tried and thought they succeeded in burning to death two teenagers,
Yes,
burning alive.
burning
alive.
them alive. That's what they thought they did, and were
Yes.
And
proud
they
of
were
that.
and they were proud of it.
Yes.
So I don't
And
know what
Betty
else to call
Jenkins
that.
said the crack epidemic. And she's right.
Yep.
Putting them drugs in those different neighborhoods the way that they did, that was yet another form, another way of genocide. And we still persevered. We still made it through. I
So,
wish that our kids would really recognize just how strong they really are.
but they
Like
don't know
now
the
they
history.
really.
They're not taught the history, so they will never, until they're taught that history, specifically at home, they will never know.
Yeah.
Because it's up to us to teach our own. At this
Mm.
point, it's up to us to teach our own. Now, I would like I'm so ashamed that I cannot remember that poor woman's name who just died by police fire, the one who just got shot in the face for trying to take a pot of boiling water off her stove. I want to
Sonya
read
Massey.
this. Thank you. Thank you for
Say
that.
her
I want to
name.
read this
Hmm.
excerpt on page 17. This follows on to all these newspapers articles talking about how this community of black people were, good Negroes. So the editor of this paper goes on to say, if all his, meaning Grandison's race, were like the Goolsbys, there would be no race problem to discuss.
Mm.
This statement stems from the absurd and prevailing belief that black people are to blame for racial issues in America. The notion is shattered by the fate of. Oh, well, he goes on to say that basically the whole rest of this book kind of shatters that illusion. But even now, people are saying if that woman hadn't have reached for the pan is a load of, even then they're faulting her.
Yep.
And there was
Yeah.
a good bit of distance. Even if first of all, she looked kind of frail, the pan looked kind of heavy. They were kind of intimating that she could have used a full thing of boiling water as a weapon. There was enough distance between her and the policeman that wasn't ever going to happen. He wanted to shoot her. He shot her. He found the reason and he did it. It's even worse because she phoned them expecting to
The, Brian,
get
you
protected.
frozen.
Am I back?
Yeah,
You're
you're
back
back.
now.
Okay. So she called the police expecting to be, because she thought there was an intruder. She needed help. She ended up dead.
But the sad thing about it is that we had somebody that came on the genealogy adventures page that got upset because we were talking about Project 2025. And she asked, I thought, is this a genealogy page or a political page? And I responded, it's actually a page. It is a genealogy page that shows the parallel of what went on in the past and how it still is happening now. And that is the same thing that happened with Sonia Massey, with the stories that's going on in your book, with the things that have happened in my book, with the things that have gone on in other people's research. This is how Black people find their families, in the process of the different situations that have gone on in these stories. They have to stop acting like this stuff doesn't exist. They
We
have to
learn our
stop
history.
acting as if these things did not happen.
Yeah. And in the process of researching, we learn history. We learn our family's history, things, the
Yes.
fates that befell certain family members, but then we get the larger context of Black history in this country.
Yeah.
So to that person who complained about it, sorry, love, Black genealogy and history and politics goes hand in glove, because politics has been the noose around our necks since the day the
Since
first
the day
enslaved
we
Africans stepped in this land.
That's
There
right.
is no
So
distinguishing between the two. So I want to get into what the crux of the book was actually about,
right.
because I think that this is a good point. So, um, or as you were talking in the book, you were explaining that again, this is a very prosperous Black community. There was a family wedding that a young man called Ulysses Goolsby, and a brother and some friends or cousins of his. We'll get more depth of this. Anyway, they were just excited. They wanted to go to this wedding. It was a miserable day. It had been raining. The roads weren't great. I'm presuming they were like basically muddy dirt tracks. He's in a wagon with his family. They're all kind of getting ready to go to this wedding, probably figuring out who they're looking forward to seeing. Someone may have had a sweetheart or whatever. I'm just putting this into a human context. We know what Black weddings are like. We know the joyful events that they are, the food and the friendship and the camaraderie and the fellowship. And this white man called Henry Villepie, or Villepie, is driving his wagon towards them, and then it's not explained, but he wants them off the road. And basically, this incident involving what I can only call road rage takes place.
Brian, you froze. So what I'll continue this, yeah, what he said, it was road rage. Brian, you froze. You back?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, go
Can you
ahead.
hear me? Okay. So basically, this road rage incident happens, and Oris, do you want to take over from there? Just kind of describe what the actual incident that took place was.
Sure. So yeah, Henry Villepigue was riding down the road, and he was offended in his soul that a young black man was in the road in front of him. But that's because there were certain unwritten rules back then that a black person has to get out of the road to let a white person pass, and those silly, silly rules may not Ulysses Goolsby might not have been aware of those rules because he was actually a pretty, what you might call even privileged young man, even though he was black. Um, he had his own buggy. He had, a house. He owned the land. His father owned the land. His mother owned the land. Um, and everybody in Early County really respected the Goolsbys, even the white people. Uh, However, Henry Villepigue was not from Early County. He did not know the Goolsbys. He actually, funny enough, he was from South Carolina originally.
Mhm.
So he was new to the area, and he was just really just beside himself to see a black man in the road. Even though Ulysses did get out of the road, he pulled his mule out of the road, but he could not get his buggy out of the road. He had a whole buggy with people in it. I mean, he had his girlfriend with him. He could not put that up on there's clay banks on the side of the road. So that was not going to happen. And there was plenty of room in the road for Henry Villepigue to pass through. But just the I guess the audacity of this young black man doing nothing wrong was offensive to Henry Villepigue, that he decided to get out of his buggy and draw his pistol on this teenager who was with his girlfriend going to a wedding. And thankfully, there were two young white boys in Henry Villepique's buggy that actually stopped Henry from killing Ulysses Goolsby. But instead, he said, well, okay, give me my buggy whip. And he went and proceeded to whip Ulysses Goolsby, a total stranger who was only 17, 18 years old, and whipped him so much that the people that I have on tape talking about this incident that knew him said that that man split Ulysses' face in two. And they even, all of them, they show in the videotapes, exactly where the scar was, because there was a huge scar the next day that, he was hit in the face with this whip by a stranger who he did not know in front of three of his friends. So that is kind of the beginning of the story. A lot of the details are kind of unclear as to what happens between then and the next day. But at some point, Grandison Goolsby, which is the father of Ulysses Goolsby, he finds out that his son had been hit by this man. And Grandison did not know this man, had never heard of this man before. It's reported that he asked his white friends in town, what's going on with this man? Why would he hit my son like that? Should I go confront him? And his white friends said, yeah, you should go confront him and find out what happened. And some of my family members are like, that was a setup. They should have known that he should not have gone to confront this man. But that was the type of man Grandison was. He wasn't just going to let it go. He wanted to find out what happened. And if my son did anything wrong, well, I'm going to whip my son again. But, it's a very old school mindset that is a little, I think, strange in modern times to read these things. But he thought it was appropriate, and not just to confront him, but to bring his son, Ulysses, and his next oldest son, Mike, with him for this confrontation and forced them to go. And when he went to Henry Villepique's house, he was greeted with gunfire. That's how, when Henry Villepique came out of his door and realized, oh, that's the same bleep I hit yesterday, he started shooting. And he got off shots before Grandison even got his rifle. But Grandison did have his rifle as well. And he retrieved that rifle very quickly, almost Mission Impossible style. He got that rifle up and was able to shoot the gun out of Henry Villepique's hand. And as Henry Villepique turned to go get another gun from his wife, Grandison kept shooting, and Henry Villepique ended up losing his life, messing around with Grandison Goolsby. But Grandison knew that what had just happened was going to be the end of his life as well. So he was able to make provisions for his family and went to his friend's house, where unfortunately he was lynched the following day, along with several people in his immediate family who were killed in the process of looking for Grandison and his two sons.
And and this isn't going to win me any friends or accolades, but can I just say that all of this stems from Villepique, who, with his privilege and sense of entitlement, felt that he could come down off his wagon and do what he did.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing to indicate that the traveling Black Party, who again were looking forward to a family event, were the instigators. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but that man clearly felt he owned the roads. And I just want to point this out. For those of you who didn't hear what I said before, Villepique was an overseer. Okay? He didn't own the house he lived in. He didn't own the land he lived on. So I'm positive that had to have factored into it. Looking at this young man, these young people thinking, and we coming from South Carolina, and Donnie and I know South Carolina, thinking these are some uppity.
They were well-dressed people who were on their way to a wedding looking really nice, and he just wasn't understanding how these well-dressed N-words could be walking around here with their own horse and buggy doing these things, because he came from not just South Carolina, that area of South Carolina that truly did not believe in Black folks being like that.
Oh, you mean the part of South Carolina where the Confederacy lived?
Yes, where
Never died.
Confederacy was just almost created. I mean, that was it. And they didn't have that was his problem. But then Oris does something even more beautiful, and he points out why Villepigue is so against Black people. Please tell them why he's
Oh, can I
so.
just read this one sentence? Because this is gonna. I have a feeling this is gonna fit into exactly what Orice is gonna say. And again, I wanted to call out something in his book, page 33. This is what let me know that as a writer you were for real, and made me give it this book the 2 thumbs up. I knew you weren't gonna pull any punches. It was heartbreaking to know that her, meaning Mary, Ulysses' mother, and Grandison's wife, had survived slavery and Reconstruction only to be confronted with Jim Crow. Mary knew that Ulysses was not attacked solely because of road rage, but because the joy, wealth, and freedom of a Black boy was offensive and threatening to many white men.
Most
We're
definitely.
dealing with that today with Christian nationalism.
Most definitely. But please let them know, because he put this in his book, and I don't want to say it. I want you to tell them exactly why Villepigue was the way he was towards these kids.
You talking about what happened to his grandmother's brother?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, his grandmother's brother, Richard Bostic, was a slave owner. Of course, I'm sure many of his ancestors were slave owners. Um, and Richard Bostic was reportedly killed by the people he enslaved. And I can only imagine what went into something like that. That could be a whole other book if anyone wants to write a book about that, because from what the article says is that they waited for him. They plotted this. I mean, imagine how horrible he must have been for them to sit around thinking about, and and they always try to say that Black people, oh, how could you just stay in slavery for 400 years, just sat there and took it? No, we didn't. We always fought back. We always rebelled. We always did. So you see stories like this. They're common. You just got to find them. And I stumbled on
Mm-hmm.
this one, but he was killed. Uh, they waited for him. I think he asked them to set a fire for him because he had been caught in the rain, and I shouldn't laugh, but they
It's
got
funny.
him. They got him from behind, I think with an axe or something. They ground his bones into ash. I mean, just literally, they took care of him in the way that they felt was necessary in that moment. And again, this has happened so many times, um, and it just shows you, because of course those Black people were put on trial for that, and probably hanged. But who was really doing the wrong in that moment? Legally, slavery was okay, and that's the problem that people seem to forget all the time. So, um, and again, like I said, we still haven't reckoned with that it was legal. It was legal to do these things. You could legally whip, just like how Henry Villepigue whipped Ulysses Goolsby. That was legal to do
Yep.
until really recently. I mean, and however, it was illegal to teach somebody how to read. So the way
Mm.
that those laws were specifically against us, and the Villepigue family was used to that, and I'm sure a lot of the families that lost a lot of their land, and of course they lost enslaved people after the Civil War. They were so salty about these things that, again, you can't own people. You shouldn't have really been owning people in the first place. So you gotta get over that. But the Villepigue family was not over that, especially Henry. I can't speak for the rest of them, but certainly Henry. was not over that. And the other part of the buggy incident is that it's been reported by many people that the Goolsby buggy was a lot nicer than the Villa buggy. So it's that type of jealousy as well. That wow, you're jealous of people that are just now getting started. You had a several 100-year head start at being able to hold your own enterprises and things in America. And they did a better job. The Goolsbys were great farmers. Grandison earned a lot of money and he was able to buy a nice buggy. Henry Villepigue did not own a shred of land, and maybe his buggy was not as nice. So there's a jealousy aspect as well, in addition to that generational hatred and the generational racial terror that was in his family. So I did bring that up. When I discovered that information, I was like, I can't not include this in the book. Because think about the story that he must have been told on his side of the family about what happened. Because of course, a lot of them are like, oh, well, we loved our slaves like they were family members. And they, that was like a no, little brother, a little sister. So how could they kill, that just, that's the version of the story that a lot of those families tell.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, what
yeah,
was shocking for me is hearing people say those stories about people that their family enslaved, and me finding out that some of the people they were talking about were 50, 60 years old. But speaking about that black person like Clive, an imbecile.
yep.
Brian.
I know I'm probably frozen again.
Actually, it seems Danya might be frozen this
Oh,
time.
okay. So it's not me this time. It's just sometimes I think it's to our credit as a people that we just pick ourselves up and we just keep it moving. I think it was somewhere in the book you actually addressed that. I think it was kind of earlier on that the trauma has never stopped us. We just, I guess, almost at this point, Black people in the United States just expect trauma on a, I don't want to exaggerate, on a regular basis. I'm not going to say on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And we
I'll say
just
daily.
it's become so it's abnormal, but it's become so normal to us that it's kind of almost lost its shock. Sometimes it takes something incredibly shocking to kind of wake us up out of that kind of acceptance.
Right. You,
I don't think
I
we
haven't
have been
disagreed with
woken
anything
up
you said.
yet.
Yeah.
I don't think we've been woken up yet. I don't think it's happened yet. I think the
Good
last time
Lord.
we woke up, huh?
Good Lord, what does it take? What
Emmett
more does it
Till.
take? We had George Floyd.
But we
We
went
had
back to sleep.
Ahmaud. We had Ahmaud Arbery. We had
But
uh,
we went back to sleep.
It's
Emmett
a
yes,
Till was
cycle that keeps repeating itself over and
exactly.
over and over again.
Exactly. The last time we were woke for a good long time was Emmett Till. And when we were woke for a good long time, look at what we did. We got the Civil Rights Act done. We did a lot of different things. But soon as we got what we thought we wanted, we slowed down. We stopped. We didn't do the things we thought we were where we were supposed to be. And now it keeps happening. And this time, we're not waking up. This time, we're not doing what we're supposed to do. This time, we are constantly letting these things happen. Sonya Massey did not get the kind of the kind of the kind of advertising, the kind of publicity that she should have gotten. Because I'm not even gonna lie to you. I didn't know about it. I saw my daughter's post. I saw her thing, just hashtag Sonya Massey. And I was like, what is that? And typed it up. And then first thing I see is the camera, is the body camera. And that's what I see. And I'm like, oh my God. They didn't even show that. I didn't see it.
Yeah. But think about the people. I mean, there's so many names. We could spend 7 shows just listing the names of these people, including
Yes,
all the
we
way
could.
back to the 5 people that are killed in my book, because there was never any protests for them. There was
Yes.
never any charges
Yep.
brought. There was never any nothing. And
Yes.
that's something that I discovered 100 years later.
Yes.
Imagine how many other people there have been over the years up until now. People like Sonya Massey. There's probably another Sonya Massey, from last week or the week before.
Say
It's
it.
just it happens over and over again, and I don't know
We're
what it
used
will
to it
take.
now.
They're used to it,
Yep.
and it's a part of the culture too. It's
Yep.
especially as far as policing is concerned. Because of course the sheriff of Early County is the one leading the lynching mobs in my
That
book.
part.
Or it's just like you're reading my mind because I really would like to spend the closing 15 or so minutes of the show talking about the farce of the judicial system when it came to Ulysses and Mike,
Yeah,
because that was a travesty. And considering that, I think you wrote on page 37 that Grandison was really worried. He was, I don't know if you used the word angry. He was upset about the situation involving Ulysses because he didn't want his son killed by a white man. Or he didn't want his life or losing his life to a white man, which, as you're going to probably, which you're going to explain about the court cases, in a way, Ulysses did because he sat in jail for a long time, not able to live life with the freedom that was his to have.
yeah. I mean,
Over 1,500 days.
and both brothers, if you think about, because they both spent years in jail based off of something that happened. Especially, I want to say Mike, because Mike is the other brother. Mike was not the one attacked by Henry Villepigue. He wasn't even there. I mean, the only
Yep.
reason he went to Villepique's house the next day is because his father made him. He had nothing to do with any of it, and
Yep.
still, because of the formalities, had to spend all this time in jail. And my heart really weeps for Mike. Of
Yep.
course, for both brothers, for everybody, for our whole family. But when I think about Mike, especially now that I've been able to find his son, he has two living children right now.
Oh,
Mm.
Um,
wow. Okay.
yes, and they're both in their 80s. And I've been able to have conversations with his son, and it was eye opening to me because his son, who's going to be 88 in about 30 days, um, he had no idea his father ever went to jail and was convicted of murder. This was complete news to him.
Oh my goodness.
And I think about how Mike had to go through that. And I don't want to give away too much of the book, but he had to go through that. He was able to come out of it, kind of, and then had to go on and almost forget about what happened. But how can you forget? Listen, I couldn't do a day in jail, okay? I don't know how you do years in jail for something you had nothing to do with. And then you just have to go and just live your life. I mean, and never talk about it again. Was he able to talk about it to his wife, or I know his children didn't know about it. So, and then,
Yeah.
for him to eventually, have health problems that I think could be directly tied to the trauma of his time in jail. And we're talking about jail. We're skipping over the part where he was on the run in Mississippi.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't, I, I wouldn't wish that on anybody either. And
As a
again,
teenager,
he
as
right,
a
he was
teenager,
16 years old.
Right.
There are things that he
Right.
had to go through at 16 that I wouldn't want to go through as a grown man. So,
I'm going to say that nothing in his life, and again, I'm going to say this as a middle class black teenager from a prosperous family who lived in a nice home, there was nothing in his life that prepared him for what happened as soon as all of this went down and he was on the run and then gets arrested and in prison. Nothing prepared him for that.
Especially his, because they were somewhat, as Ora said, they were somewhat privileged kids. So because they came from prominent family members who had, land and money and things of that nature. But his story reminds me of somebody who's going through some stuff right now. There's a man right now who's in jail who was found finally his conviction was removed, and they still won't let this man out of jail right now, right at this moment. I think in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
same thing. So you got all of this going on. It's crazy.
This comment is definitely not going to win me any friends. I just find it funny that a specific gender of a specific group are forced to call everyone else savage when, and I'm not saying that black people haven't done savage things from time to time when push comes to shove, when you push our back up against the wall and give us no other options. That's when we do it. That's when Nat Turner did it. That's when Stoner Rebellion happened. All this slave uprising. You push people too far and you push them up against the wall, they are going to come out swinging. Just like Villa Pete's family member. He had to have done something to those enslaved people. He had to traumatize them to the back of beyond for them to decide to do what they did to him. I'm going to flip it and say not so the other way. And for people who ask me online, why are black people so violent? First of all, we're no more violent, no more or less violent than anyone else. And you know what? When it comes to gun violence and all the rest, we learned from the best. Y'all seeped us in this culture for 400 years. You think we were blind? You think we didn't figure out how white people settle their differences?
Mm-hmm.
So our ancestors at some point must have said, you know what, in this country, I guess this is how they roll. And this is what we have to do to get out from under.
Come on,
So
Brian.
I,
don't blame the student.
yeah. I want to recognize somebody because you just reminded me of a story that I want to share with you all. After we get off, everyone look up Lena Baker. Lena Baker was the only woman ever electrocuted in the electric chair in the state of Georgia. She was convicted of killing a white man that she worked with, well, worked for, who was assaulting her. And he had been assaulting her over an extended period of time until she shot him and
Black
he
lady, he
died.
was a doctor.
I don't know what he was. I don't even know his name, but she was black, Lena Baker. And this is the same area as Early County. This is Randolph County, Georgia, which is the neighboring county. And I found out after I wrote the book, the same judge that sentenced her to death is mentioned in my book because his father was the judge in the Goolsby case.
Mm.
And this was in 1945, I want to say. So again, this is years after the Goolsby case. I mean, this is still relatively recent. This is in the lifetime of, my parents' generation where this happened. And I'm just like, wow, you talk about when we're pushed to the edge. Someone said survival in there. Survival was, that's all she was thinking about. That's what she had to do in that moment. And it still led to her death. But her last words are on file, once she was sitting in the electric chair. Check out her last words because she said very clearly, I did nothing wrong and I'm going to be fine. And I just think that type of conviction, it resembles savagery a little bit, but it's survival. It's where we've gotten to the point where this is all that we can do, and we're either going to fight or we're going to die, and people choose to fight because at
Yep,
least then you
that's
have a
what she said.
chance.
Her last words were she had done nothing wrong. She was being held as a slave in the 40s, and he was consistently raping her, sexual assault. Okay, well, I'm not gonna do that no more. Okay.
So, but just trust and believe. If there was ever a story or a history that proved that the stand your ground laws were never meant for black people, Grandison is the perfect example of that. He was a
Yep.
black father trying to teach his black sons a lesson because he said if the fault was Ulysses, he was going to whip Ulysses' butt for putting it, for getting himself in a situation that could have ended his life. Um, and a white man's coming at him and his sons with a gun, of course he's going to shoot back. What are you going to do? Stand there and let some dude shoot you? You're going to
Thank you.
fight back.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I can't wait until I want to give people a chance to read the book. But I have the some statements from the governor of Georgia, Hugh Dorsey, from this time period, that he really sums up a lot of what happened, and I can't wait to share it with people. Hopefully, I'm going to do a documentary at some point where I can go a little bit deeper into the story and show some of these things. But people at that time even understood what else was Grandison supposed to do? Stay there and get shot? No. So that it's not like it's news that I've come to this revelation that maybe Grandison didn't do anything wrong. They knew
Mhm.
that at the time, but they still
You
went
know,
and killed him.
you know what? It just dawned on me. The governor of Georgia needs to do an exoneration for Grandison, Mickle, and Ulysses. A formal, I am the governor of Georgia, this injustice happened, I exonerate them. Their names are
Just
clear.
like they did for Lena, because they did it for Lena Baker. But
This,
we have to go. Oris, your book is awesome. Guys, definitely get the book. Um,
Thank you.
we want to come back. If you do that, if you do the documentary, please let us know. Let's
yes,
do it. Let's do a show on here. We can make it a 2-hour special. Guys, we will see you again September 29th because we are
and
on hiatus.
we are indeed. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Do watch the previous 7 seasons of Genealogy Adventures. We're everywhere: Facebook, YouTube, all the usual places. And for those of you who really do want to watch just for the genealogy, you're spoiled for choice between the previous 6 seasons. So
Yes.
until September, I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. You guys enjoy the rest of your summer.
Indeed.
Bye.
Bye.